I'm dead. You want to talk about my family, and here I've been dead to them for over 50 years. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. They don't want no parts of me, and me, I don't want no parts of them.
Ruth McBride Jordan's story was assembled painstakingly by her son James over a 14-year period and was published by Riverhead Books in 1996. To date, The Color of Water has sold over 2 million copies worldwide, translated into more than 20 languages. It was serialized in the New York Times, where it remained on their bestsellers list for 2 years. Mr. McBride's brilliant narrative travels backward and forward through time to paint a picture of multi-generations of inspiring devotion and, on a more personal level, of America's most destructive prejudices. We'll borrow scattered strokes from James's paintbrush to introduce you to his amazing mother.
My family mourned me when I married in 1942. They said Kaddish and sat Shiva. That's how Jews mourn their dead.
Ruth McBride Jordan raised 12 black children and sent all of them to college and in most cases graduate school. Her children became doctors, professors, chemists, teachers, yet none of them even knew her maiden name until they were grown.
I was born an Orthodox Jew on April 1st, 1921, April Fool's Day, in Poland. My father's name was Fischelszylski, and he was a rabbi. He escaped from the Russian army and snuck over the Polish border and married my mother in an arranged marriage. Tate, we called him. That means father in Yiddish. He was short, dark, hairy, and gruff. He wore a white shirt, black pants, and a tallis on his shirt sleeve. That was his uniform. My mother was the exact opposite of him. She was born in the town of Debrecen, Poland, but if you check there today, nobody would remember her family, because any Jews who didn't leave before Hitler got through with Poland were wiped out in the Holocaust. She was a quiet woman, my sweet mama. That's what we called her, Mama.
Ruth's neighbors thought she was strange. She could speak Yiddish. She drank hot tea out of a glass. She had an absolute distrust of authority and an insistence on complete privacy, which seemed to make her even odder. Her family was huge, 12 kids, and the nuts and bolts of raising the kids was left entirely to Ruth, who acted as chief surgeon for bruises.
Put iodine on it.
War secretary.
If somebody hits you, take your fist and crack them.
Religious consultant.
Put God first.
Chief psychologist.
Don't think about it.
And financial advisor.
What's money if your mind is empty?
James says he was terrified when it came his turn to start school. On that ill-fated morning, Ruth dressed him while his siblings laughed at his terror. Ruth inspected James's first day of school attire. The clothes were clean, but not new. The pants had been Billy's, the shirt was David's. The coat had been passed down from Dennis to Billy to David to Richie to James. Gradually, as the weeks passed and the terror of going to school subsided, James began to notice that his mother looked nothing like the other kids' mothers. In fact, she looked more like the kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Alexander, who was white. Mommy, why don't you look like the other mothers?
Because I'm not them.
Who are you?
I'm your mother.
Then why don't you look like Rodney's mother or Pete's mother? How come you don't look like me?
I do look like you. I'm your mother. You ask too many questions. Educate your mind. School is important. Forget Rodney and Pete, you hear me? Don't you follow none of them around. Stick to your brothers and sisters, that's it. Don't tell nobody your business, neither.
End of discussion.
My father came to America first, and after a few months sent for his family. Me, Mama, and my older brother Sam. I was 2 years old and Sam was 4. I have a legal paper in the shoebox under my bed that says I arrived here on August 23rd, 1923, on a steamer called the Austergeist. I kept that paper on my person wherever I went for over 20 years. I didn't want them to throw me out. Who? Anybody. The government, my father, anybody. My father would say,
I am a citizen and you are not. I can send you back to Europe anytime I want.
He used to threaten us with that, to send us back to Europe, especially my mother, because she was the last of her family to get here. She used to talk about how the Russian soldiers would come into the village and line up the Jews and shoot them in cold blood. She was terrified of Europe and happy to be in America. When we first got off the boat, we lived with my grandparents, Zadie and Bubby, on 115th and St. Nicholas in Manhattan. Zadie kept a picture of himself and my grandmother on his bureau. They were standing side by side, Zadie wearing a black suit with a hat and Bubby wearing a wig or shidel, as was the religious custom. Bubby was bald underneath that wig, I believe. That's why women were supposed to keep their heads covered. They were bald. I enjoyed my grandparents. They were strictly orthodox and ate kosher every day. Now, you need to read up on kosher because I ain't no expert. The way we did it, you had different table settings for every meal. Different tablecloths, different dishes, forks, spoons, knives, everything. And you couldn't mix your meals like you had your dairy meals and your meat meals. You sit your butt down and you eat what you're supposed to and you do what you're supposed to. I remember when Zadie died in the apartment. I don't know how he died, he just died. In those days, people didn't linger and fool around like people do now with tubes hanging out their mouths and making doctors rich and all this. They just died, dead, bye. They laid him out on his bed and brought us children into the bedroom to look at him. They had to lift me and my brother Sam off the floor to see him. His beard lay flat on his chest and his hands were folded. He had a little black tie on. But you know, I felt they were burying him too quick. I wanted to ask someone, suppose Zadie's joking and wakes up to find out he's buried. That's why I tell you all to make sure I'm dead when I'm gone. Kick me and pinch me and make sure I'm gone. Because the thought of being buried alive, lying there all smushed up and smothered and surrounded by dead people, Lord, that scares me to death.